Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. Pick them up at artistfirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at artistfirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And I'm Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Margaret.
And remember last week?
Yes.
Last week we got stupid.
This is true.
Well, this week we're going to not get stupid, but we're going to do the antidote to stupid.
Well, it's a tool.
Smart pills.
Okay.
The antidote to stupid is not IPA, but I'm going to try anyway.
Oh, well, all right.
We are going to be drinking heavily during tonight's show. As far as you know.
As far as you know.
We would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, we've done that. We're not going to do that tonight. Maybe another night. Those are the best shows. Anyway, we are going to be talking about stupidity's ancient foe.
Yes.
Dialog.
Dialogue.
You know, remember Dialog? Back when you and your wife used to talk to each other? way back, like 10 minutes after you were married? Well, we're going to reprise that, and we're going to try and expand that. And one of Dialog's bestest buddies, bestest friends, one of Dialog's promulgators from way back, was our ancient Greek buddy Socrates, mm-hmm. as chronicled by his student Plato, who is arguably more famous for his chronicling of Socrates than any other reason, really.
It's true.
Although he had the solids,
right.
The Platonic solids,
yes.
And the platitudes.
Oh.
I mean, you know, Plato is all through everything. He's there's something known as Platonic love, which is, you know, sort of the love of knowledge, or sort of an abstraction of love. So Plato is all over, but he did write a whole bunch of, chronicled, if you will, a whole bunch of the dialogues of Socrates. I think that might even be the name of some of his works, is the dialogues. And to summarize it for everyone out there who may or may not have had a classical exposure to Socrates back in your youth, Socrates was a Greek philosopher, I suppose, and he actually was killed or forced to commit suicide because he was accused of being a corrupter of the youth.
Right.
Back then, that was a capital offense.
Apparently.
So corrupting the youth. Thankfully, in today's day and age, it is no longer a capital offense. A lot of people will be up the river for that one. But Socrates he ran in essence, a form of school, a form of sort of like a debate club, if you will, you might characterize it, where he and a group of his students and sometimes passers-by or, you know, other more notable figures of the day would debate the issues of the day. You know, they would, right. In essence, bring up a particular point or points, and then he had a method aptly named the Socratic method of exploring a particular topic and arguing with and amongst each other about this particular topic. And he himself developed a sort of a technique by which he would, kind of debate a particular person or a particular idea amongst a group of people. And that he called the dialogues, or dialogue. And that's actually a Greek word, which is probably dialogos or something of that nature, to explore the thought, to in essence tease apart the other person's position, and he would do it through a series of interrogations or questions. So Socrates was a wily old dude, and he had a whole bunch of young bucks, if you will, young Greek proto-philosophers who would hang out with him and just have a great old time until they forced him to quaff a little hemlock and shuffle off the mortal coil. What was his last words? It's like, I owe, the politicus, the measure of a young cock or something like that. It was like his last words were very, very sort of mysterious, but I think it was some sort of vague Greek insult that no one gets anymore. But back then it was like a fun thing to say before you shuffle off the mortal coil.
Well, his observation of the way a human mind functions, and this is why we're going down this road. In his definition, the growth of the human mind is everything. And the way a mature human mind functions is that you would have a proof, you would have something concrete, and you analyze it, and then you come to a belief. An immature mind believes first, and then tries to prove it. Or, if at all, try to prove it. You just believe first. It's more of a...
Would you say, though, he was trying to teach people these kinds of ways of... He was a kind of using his insight.
Right. He basically felt that the growth of the human mind, the maturation of the mind was everything. What was that? The Sybil, the one that was doing all those predictions, the temple, is it Dionysus? No.
Could have been.
Had said that he was the greatest mind in all Greek philosophy. And he didn't believe it because he's like, why am I the greatest mind? Actually went over to try to engage her and find out, why did you say that?
Perhaps that was Delphi?
Yes, Delphi.
Yeah, the Oracle of Delphi.
Oracle of Delphi.
That's right. There we go.
Yeah. So, in that temple, there is a saying that is put in that temple, which is know thyself, which is something that he absolutely believed. And really know what your responses are and what you're thinking and why you're thinking.
Introspection, in essence.
Yes. So, his way of looking at people, what he's seeing is that the way the immature mind functions is that it's just very happy to form an opinion, whether or not there's any backing to it, any fact to it. And they would happily continue that way. And if they can get any attention, they'll just continue doing this as a habit. So it becomes quick reactions. Well, this is the way they always talk about this particular issue.
Groupthink.
And falling to easy certainties or one-liners. Something that they could just grab. Or rage. And this is what he observed. Because these young minds crave confirmation. And they resist contradiction.
And one might say that not much has changed in about 2,500 years now.
Well, we'll get to that point. I'm just describing what his observations are. And he says once that starts happening, there is this downward trend where attention spans collapse, imbecility propagates, and once that attitude is communicated through a group and imbecility reigning, then it becomes normal, and then it becomes celebrated. Which, oh my goodness!
It's good that you're dumb.
Well, just this, whatever this premise is.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, the attention span collapses. Okay, so you're not concentrating very much, and then you're just responding, and imbecility propagates. It just it transfers to the next person and the next person.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's considered normal.
It's normalized to the group.
And then when you repeat it, it's celebrated.
Well, in essence, that's the confirmation bias.
Right.
As you become one of the true believers, and you're within the group, then you get all the fedids and accolades, and oh, you're such a great person because you believe like we do. Right. So, as I just mentioned, you'll just say the same. We see this today quite a bit. Right. In our current social media, and it plays right off of, and I'm sorry, I don't want to get ahead, so you go right ahead.
Well, in essence, it being celebrated basically is pointing to the capacity for rational discourse, which is what Socrates was known for.
Yes.
Between people who disagree generally degrades. It rots. It doesn't exist anymore. There's no more that ability to talk about concepts that people don't agree on, and the civility of it rots away.
No more dialogue.
Right. And this is what he had observed.
Right.
We're talking centuries.
Well, this is BC. And I'm going to say probably 450, 500 BC. So this is like 2,500 years ago. Way before the internet.
Yeah.
Way before the internet.
There's a gentleman who wrote the book on the Socratic method. His name was Ward Farnsworth. And he pointed out that considering today's social media, as Michael was mentioning, this this description permeates, is very apt for all the social media sites.
Yep.
So Farnsworth, he has a list of descriptions of this. Would you want to hear this?
Let's go. I mean, anybody with a name like Farnsworth has got to be worth listening to.
Okay.
Sounds smart.
The description of this kind of degeneration: fanatical partisanship,
check.
Wishful thinking in place of truth,
check.
Shaming on dissenters, censorship or self-censorship of dissenting views,
right?
Inability of people who disagree to talk, and let alone cooperate.
Other than in shouting matches and flame wars and things like that.
Well, that's not a dialogue.
No, not at all.
It's not a This has to do with engaging in dialogue.
Right.
And he noted that most thinking people loathe this and fear all that it involves or begins to involve. It will degrade, and there's no, as you said, it's just like this shouting match. For what purpose except just to shout? There is no.
It becomes an end unto itself almost.
So for the Socratic method to work, you're going to need people who are willing to engage in a dialogue without fear and without taking offense.
And that's not where we are today, unfortunately.
Well, it's very interesting because this is all under the category of the immature mind.
To explore that just a little bit, last week we talked a lot about stupidity.
Right.
And it's true. We every one of us is stupid in one way, shape, or form. And we talked about how stupidity, in essence, promulgates and propagates throughout, almost through an entropic process. But then again, there's also the acceleration. It's like the expansion of the universe. We went through some sort of an inflationary period. People look at today and say, well, here we have just stupidity on steroids.
Right.
But yet here you go, looking back, and I looked it up just quickly. Plato, and Socrates before him, lived about 450 BCE or BC, depending on how you want to phrase that. And that is literally 2,500 years ago, way before technology. And one of what we said last week about stupidity is we thought, well, access to information was the cure for that. Well, no.
Oh, yes,
and the internet itself is not the root cause of stupidity. The root cause is a lot closer to home.
Mm-hmm. And technology does not
People
solve stupidity.
No, in fact, it actually amplifies it. But people just are stupid.
We agreed it's a trait.
And it's a trait. And you notice that, again, speaking again, Margaret, in the terms of entropic and the entropic effect, stupidity and all the things you just described are lower energy states. When you don't have to think about something and you just jump to an easy certainty, it means you're using less energy, you're using less thought, you're using less time. You're just falling into the default case, especially when you talk about groupthink and this sort of self-reinforcing, you're self-censoring and you're parroting what the group has said is correct and right, so you get celebrated and you are doing the normal thing. Well, all those are entropic positions. They are positions of the unconscious mind.
Right.
Plato and I'm sorry, I missed Farnsworth. How could I forget? Talk about the immature mind, but the immature mind is the entropic mind. It's the unconscious mind, because it's just doing. It's like go along to get along, but it's not even that. It's just doing what everyone else does because it's easy. And if it was just one group where everyone was in the same group and everyone agreed on everything and no one ever disagreed with anyone else in this idyllic society, you would have, in essence, a very low energy, high entropy, low energy mind, sort of a group mind, the mass unconscious. I think that's a phrase which has come out one time or another from Freud and Jung and all these other guys. The mass unconscious is a very low energy state. So it also tends to promulgate and propagate, because entropy, by its very definition, is the way things want to go. It's the way the river wants to flow through the valleys and not over mountaintops, because that takes energy, that takes thought, it takes time, it takes discernment, it takes maturity. It takes work, to put it bluntly. And the simple, easy, cookie, lazy way out of everything is the low energy state.
Right.
And it's very attractive, because human beings, and actually all life in general, wants to conserve its energy. Energy is a difficult thing to get. To get enough food or enough resources to turn into energy to do things takes energy. So you want to budget the amount of energy you use on any particular thing. So a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to think about anything because that's way too much hard, way too difficult. So that saves all that energy. You can just turn it off, from the neck up, click, it's off. So, hey, man, the lights aren't, there's not even lights on upstairs. Nothing's going on up there. But we're saving energy, aren't we? And as long as you can give the facade or the appearance of, sort of action directed by rational thought, but if everything is cookbook, if everything's paint by numbers, if you put in A, B, C, and you always get D, then you say, well, just jump right to D. You don't have to consider anything.
Right.
You're given the shortcuts, and you just go there.
Right. I think we said this before. It's the one-liners.
One-liners, easy slogans.
One-liners.
What do they call them? Sound bites.
Yeah, easy certainties. whatever.
And this is emotion, too. Emotion triggers.
Yeah.
People say they're triggered all the time. Well, a trigger is exactly that. Ekman talks about this.
Right.
A trigger is something which happens almost at a not even conscious level, but at a spinal, like at a nerve synapse level. So something happens and you react way before any particular amount of mental effort is ever used. That's important when you're talking about survival.
Well,
but it's not necessarily important for opinions. Go ahead.
I have a question because when you're talking about reactions like that, survival reflexes, does that actually go through the spinal cord, the brainstem, or are we talking about like the vagus nerve, where it's all nerve to nerve kind of thing?
Some very basic reactions never make it to the brain before things happen. So,
right.
Reflexive actions. You put your hand on something hot, and you reflexively flinch away from it.
Right. You don't think of it.
You do not think because to the amount of time it takes to get even the pain impulse up to the brain, for the brain to realize that something's happening, and then to send the impulse all the way back down to the affected portion of the body so that it can move, is too long. And so the evolutionary response, exactly, the evolutionary response is that's all short-circuited when there's a big enough noxious stimuli, which is what the neurologists refer to as any kind of noxious stimuli, pain, pinching, poking, stinging, burning, anything that is immediate and acute pain damage gets short-circuited. It doesn't go much further than the first nerve ganglion. Okay, so there's a nerve ganglion at the top of your arm. If given another sip of this libation, I might remember it, but it's up there somewhere. And that nerve impulse doesn't even get to the spinal cord. It gets up there, and it gets translated into a reflexive jerking of the hand and the arm back. You get it another 30, 40, 50, 150 milliseconds later, the brain goes, ow, way afterwards. Then you look at your finger and go, man, that's going to hurt later. And then it does hurt later. But initially, you may notice that it feels almost numb. If you do something to yourself, we've all had this experience where you do something silly, you cut yourself with a piece of glass or something, you go, ooh, and you pull it back and you stick your finger in your mouth and you look at it and say, right now it doesn't hurt. It just kind of feels numb. It's going to hurt later.
Yes.
But that first initial reaction, the brain has been cut off by that at a superior ganglia, some neural knot, usually in your arm or in sort of a larger jointed portion of the body, or sometimes in the spinal cord itself, but way before it gets to the brain, has said, this is way too much to deal with. You've got to survive. You've just got to react. You've got to run. You've got to hide. You've got to fight back. You don't have time to suck your finger and feel like, ow, that was an ouchie. No. Saber-toothed tiger will eat you by then. Run, and you will run. And so those are hardwired in kind of things.
Right. And it's interesting. So that's one of the reasons why if you're doing self-defense or any kind of repetitive physical motion, it's just in there. The body already
train the reflex.
Yeah, you're actually training your reflexes to respond a certain way.
Interesting thing about that is you can. What you just said is exactly where martial arts and other things use the basic reflexes, the basic fight or flight, the basic pain and reflex jerk back. So everyone has you burn your hand and you jerk it back. A martial artist has trained themselves so rigorously that when the pain comes, they don't jerk their hand back, they strike. So if you startle somebody who's been trained to react in that way, they'll hit you and hurt you before they even realize that they've done so, because their reflex reaction isn't to jerk back or to shy away. That's been not really hijacked, but it's been repurposed.
It's been, you're programming your body
right
at that point.
You repurpose that so that when something comes in and you're attacked, the very first thing is defense strike, and then the brain goes, I'm in a fight, and then other things you might then strategize. What do I do next? But you've already taken appropriate action based on the noxious stimuli and your training, not just noxious stimuli and instinct, and the basic shy away, jump away, run away. No, now it's block, strike, set, and then you're ready. You're ready to fight, but you're set. You're already balanced, set. The other guy or the other person who's attacking has been potentially thwarted, has been potentially struck in response before you realize it. So that's we're kind of going a little bit off the track, but that's an appropriate repurposing of an already incredibly strong survival level reflex. But you don't want to use that to think.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you do.
No.
What I'm saying is that if the body is trained in that particular way, the mind is free to analyze your opponent. So you can take into account whatever this conflict is, if it's not just defending yourself, is it actually trying to incapacitate or stop this using terrain, what's around you, what can be done, and analyzing the other one's movements. Is there a pattern to the movement? What is their typical way of coming at you? What is their weaknesses? It's part of the analysis that your consciousness does. But in order to do that, that's assuming that you've already trained your physical body to that point and you're capable of being centered and balanced at all points.
Well, exactly so. But to kind of come back towards where we were.
Okay.
So the current the zeitgeist, the current contretemps that we find ourselves in today now, with social media and the internet and everything else, as you mentioned, technology has just amplified the stupidity that was aptly chronicled by Plato, 2,500 years ago. And so the root cause of that is not the information or the internet or anything to do with social media. The root cause of that is people, and people like to take shortcuts. So given the opportunity, you will find yourself in a dialogue, or rather in a low-level type of conflict with someone who is unconscious. And this can happen at any moment as you walk through your daily life. You will come against somebody who, as we said last week, is obstinately stupid, and you are not going to win that argument with the person if you accept their premise, or if you, instead of dialoguing with them, try to out-shout them, which you see on the internet all the time, or out-slogan them, or try to convince them of your ideology versus their ideology, red, blue, green, whatever the heck it is. That argument you will not win. And as the old saying goes, never wrestle a pig in the mud, because you both get dirty and the pig likes it, right? So the other way people put it is, don't stoop to someone's level. So the Socratic method, as applied to the internet age, at least from what we're going to try and argue in this last half hour perhaps, is a way to begin to elevate the discourse, to move away from the lowest level entropic form, the unconscious. And so in one way, it's an application of some of Tolle's principles, in the sense that what you're doing is, yes, you accept that the person you're dialoguing with right now is in an unconscious state. You can you can hear and see and accept that this is what they're trying to put in front of you, but you have to, at that moment, say, this is what is. This is the moment of now. Is there anything I can do about it? And reactively, going at them and saying, well, no, you're wrong, or this is the way you should think, or that just reinforces the ego. That feeds that unconscious ego form or forms that they're putting up. All these, all the things that you mentioned before from Dr. Farnsworth there are all easily described as egoic forms. Every one of them becomes an entity that needs to get fed, and it gets fed. The easy certainty gets fed by you jumping to that conclusion all the time. The other things. Rage is a beautiful one. That's egoic rage. Is just reveling in all the attention it gets when it gets to explode and rave and rant and chew holes in the rug. That's egoic rage. Just loves that.
Mm-hmm.
It's in its actual element there, and getting all the attention and all of the energy, all that emotion energy that it's burning and using, because it works itself up into an egoic rage. So these things are describable in those terms, and the Socratic method can be a way of combating them, really. As we said, as we posted up on the website, Dialog is stupidity's ancient foe. Let's talk it out. It's a way to get around all this stuff.
Well, it's being in conversation with another person. And I mean real conversation. It's not like you're battling. You're actually trading ideas back and forth. Is a way to really help another person come out of that almost narcissistic viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Because whenever there's an opinion, it's I have an opinion. This is my opinion. And they go on and on with this my opinion.
They identify with the opinion.
And to be in a true verbal dialogue is the way to begin to engage and widen the viewpoint. Because there's a lot of things that are assumed when you're dealing with an immature mind. They may have already evaluated you and think, well, you're stupid.
Well, and said, I know exactly who you are, and pigeonholed you.
Yeah, and they don't want to investigate any further. They basically felt that they've already made the judgment call. And, you look at this and you go, it's not about you.
and nor is it about that easy certainty that, when the temptation, again, in the current age, but even back 2,500 years ago, the temptation was to dehumanize your opponent, to make them less than you, to make them automatically wrong, and then you don't dialogue with a dehumanized, automatically wrong person. You expunge them from humanity. You expel them to the outer darkness. You make it so that their opinions aren't worth considering because they're coming from someone who's automatically wrong. This is the demonization you see whenever one people has been made less than human. You see that in every pogrom and every mass, in every tyrannical regime where they've identified a class of people or a class of citizens or whomever it may be as less than human, and therefore easily disposed of and treated as objects, or treated as chattel, as slaves. You find the worst abuses of humanity. The Socratic method is a way of picking your way through that minefield. It may not be possible once you've reached full tyranny, but prior to that, before you go full tyranny, you can kind of draw back a little bit, center yourself, find your own beingness, realize that the other, despite being clouded and occluded by ideologies and other forms of easy certainties and all these other immature mindsets, there is a true being in there with whom you can find the spark of the divine and touch that. Once you get past these rather, if you really look at they're paper thin, all of these things are easily poked through, which is why the ego defends them so viciously, vehemently and viciously, is because once you poke through them and find the actual being below, it's very difficult to look at that person, to have that person look at you and say you are less than, because it's obvious you're not. And it's very difficult to hold sort of these paper-thin ideological positions because they no longer encompass the being. Once you stuff the being into these things, you identify with them and narrow yourself down so that I am this and I am that and I am not this and I am not that and this is right and that is wrong. Those are very low energy, high entropy, very unconscious positions.
Yes.
But they don't hold the whole being. They're way too small. But people fit themselves into them, fold these tiny little bits of themselves into them and then identify with those pieces and see the world through them. Today, yes, but even then, way, way back then, and way before that too. So Socrates was a genius because he saw this, was able to formulate, and we should probably go through some of them, but formulate a philosophy and sort of a method of piercing some of these veils, gently, and getting below to the actual person, drawing them out of their ideology and having an actual dialogue with them. And to some extent, Margaret, the problem today is that it's too easy to draw back and hide with all the technology veils. Those are
right.
extra veils.
Right.
But still in all, the effort is worth pursuing.
Well, many times you may only have enough of an opening to just get one word in.
Yeah.
And that word is like a seed, goes in, and
right.
the next time you speak with them, it might be a whole phrase.
Mm.
And eventually they come to a point where they're willing to engage in a dialogue with you.
Mm. And you have to feel safe, too. You have to make them feel safe, too.
Well, it's, again, if their ego is attached or if it feels attacked.
Right.
And when you are in that mode of, well, I'm superior to you, then there is no dialogue because it's already done. I know already, so you're not open to receive anything new.
Right. You've identified the other, and the other is wrong.
Right. So this is that mindset. So I already know how this goes, and you're wrong, and I'm right, and it doesn't matter what you say because they're not listening anymore. At that point, it's like, well, you don't need to engage. You could just say nothing, or if there's any kind of opening, one word is usually all you get that they might be able to receive. But I think let's go to the quote, because this has fed into...
You want to do it?
Sure.
Or do you want me to do it?
Doesn't matter. I can do it. This is Plato for Socrates. For the worst of all deceptions is self-deception. How can it help being terrible when the deceiver is always present and never stirs from the spot? In other words, the deceiver is always with you.
It is you.
Well, it's the old, you're doing this to you.
We've talked about this many times, but oftentimes people will have full-blown internal dialogues with themselves as two or three or more entities. You're always doing this. What's the matter with you? You're never going to mount up to anything. But I had to. I didn't have any choice. Back and forth, back and forth. All of this within the mind. All of this within their own being. Well, the consciousness itself is the stage upon which it all plays out. Self-deception acts that way too, and the everything that Farnsworth particularly was mentioning here, and Plato as well, via Socrates, is it feeds into this self-deception mindset. You normalize your beliefs by saying that anyone who believes otherwise is an abnormal, subhuman idiot. Well, that means that if you have any other belief than the beliefs that I have, you are no longer a being. You're no longer human. You can be disregarded. You can be discarded. You can be denigrated and vilified.
Well, you're not part of our group. That's the attitude. We can ostracize you.
Right, but worse than that, you can be ostracized. You can be dehumanized. Again, made less than pro forma, automatically. So this has been used. Pick any characteristics you like. Tall, short, color, whatever you want. And once you have said, well, this group having this characteristic is automatically subhuman. The ego has already won the argument pro forma. There needs to be no discussion with the subhuman. All you do with them is bundle them up, shove them in a box and ship them off somewhere. Never talk to them, of course. Never dialogue. You would dialogue with a subhuman like this, who has this opinion. This becomes a internal deception, self-reinforcing, and as you said, the deceiver yourself is always right there. If you have any doubt whatsoever, the ego, the egoic entity, which has taken over your identity, so the egoic entity which has taken over you, immediately tries to stamp out that internal dissent. How can you think that way? You know that that's wrong. You know that these people are less than human. You know that no consideration can be given for them. Any abuse or any kind of maltreatment is justified because they're less than human. They're less than you. They're not right. They're not normal.
Well, it's kind of interesting because that's the viewpoint is always from a power perspective. It has nothing to do with acknowledging that you're both beings. You're both human beings, and you deserve a respect for being itself. But that's the interesting part, because what is the motivation that a person has? And that's one of the things Socrates was always big on. Like, what were the underlying motivations for you to do these things?
Before we go too far, because we don't have that much time, we should go into some of his method, because it's very applicable, even though it may be difficult.
Well, yes, you need to have a person who is willing to have a real conversation, a real dialogue with you. So they call it Socratic inquiry. You ask an open-ended question. In other words, if someone made a statement, and Socrates would be doing this, he would ask a question that basically allowed the other person to define what he meant by that statement. Defining the words, defining how it was used. But what is it that you really, truly meant by that statement? And you continue with that open-ended questioning until it's clear what the statement actually is. It's not nebulous. It's not this broad category. And you narrow it down to something, to a position that can be taken.
Mm.
And once that position's taken, that's when you can test that statement. You can bear down on it and see if the explanation can hold water.
Mm.
Does it stand up to scrutiny? And once that is established, that it can stand up to scrutiny, you can begin to see what the assumptions are behind those beliefs.
Mm.
And that's an ongoing thing. That's a real conversation.
Right. So the beginning. So to apply it in the modern age, Socrates and Plato and the group there had one advantage. One big advantage was that they would get together,
Yes,
and see each other as people across a table or in a room or whatever. And in that sort of a group setting, there is an unconscious pressure. You can't just run away. You can't just hide. You can't just that in essence is losing the argument. If somebody says to you, well, what do you mean by that? And you just stand up and run away and yell as you walk out the door, blah, 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 and run. Well, everyone says, well, obviously they had nothing to back up their statement. But in the current internet age, that's kind of acceptable behavior. You just pack up your stuff and run. You're just an idiot. I'm gone. So
take my marbles and run.
Take my marbles and run. So in the current age, you have to approach this thing very, very delicately. The Socratic method, the inquiry, it was done in a non-judgmental way, and this is extremely important. It was important then, it's more important now, because the very first thing when trying to reach the humanity of the other is if the slightest whiff of judgment, they're gone. Because it's become acceptable to immediately see any form of even questioning with some sort of a judgmental as being grounds for ending the conversation and just saying, well, I'm not going to do anything. So if you're going to do this, it's difficult. It's actually perhaps more difficult. So, weigh your options. However, there is certainly some benefit, and Tolle would say this too, is that and we can go back again to the stupid are your greatest teachers. If you're going to yourself wish to move along the path of becoming more and more enlightened, more and more in the moment of now, when somebody comes into your presence, truly your presence, there's a reason for that. Tolle says you're in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. So you have to ask your internal, ask your heart state, do I need to engage? And then how? Ask how. Before you engage the person, engage your own internal. Margaret does this all the time. You in essence connect up and allow grace to come in and find the words. The words then come as the tertiary effect of knowing that you're in the moment of now, knowing that this presence has come into your two presences have come together for a reason. Connect up into your heart state, into the moment of now, into grace, if you will, another good old-fashioned word, and get the words. Those words, whatever they are, will be appropriate. They will get into the other person's, they will get past their ideology. They'll start to tickle or to just very gently brush at this idea that maybe this person on the other side of this internet thing is an actual being too. And I think Tolle says this, if you do this with this within you, people will, without knowing why, will feel it to be a different sort of interaction. It's not just this, my ideology, your ideology, red, blue, green, whatever, and we just tick, tick, tick and go, right? Because we've all reinforced our egos and we fed each other's egos and we run away. No, they're going to feel that, no, this is a difference. There's something here. There's a true reverberation within their being, that there's some connection at a true existence level with this other. You're not just being looked at as yet another ideology or another ego. You're getting fed at the being level. And so they will respond in that way. You have to maintain that. It's extremely tenuous to begin with because you're not in each other's physical presence, but presence can be transmitted through time, through space, and it certainly can be transmitted through the internet. If you mean to do it and you do it with intention and grace, it will come through, even through, tens of thousands of miles and electrons. They will feel your presence, and if you follow those promptings, you can find the person. And this exercise, why would I want to do all that? Because this exercise raises the overall consciousness of humanity. It's a very worthy goal to pursue. It helps you, but it helps everyone.
Right. No, just to be able to touch another person's heart. Maybe that's the best way, because most people, I believe that's exactly what they're looking for. They say, well, it's attention. But attention, why? What's missing? What's empty? And it's usually a heart-to-heart recognition is what they're actually hungering for. And to be able to find someone who's capable of doing that, to look at you, but they're not looking at you or your facade. They're actually looking at your heart. You're in your eyes and into the heart, and you see the soul. And that communication is so vast. There's such, how do I describe it? There's such a harmony between you and the other at that point that you really don't need words. That's the interesting part. There are no words that are necessary. And that's when whatever words you use, they're just almost like this bridge. It's only a verbal structure. But the truth of what is being communicated can pass over that easily. And the other person can receive it so totally that they just, I believe the phrase is, people don't remember what you said, but they do remember how you made them feel. And it is that what is precisely what registers for the other person. So every interaction is an opportunity to make a connection in that particular way. How did the other person feel
exactly
after this conversation with you? So doing that, engaging in that consciously, is an amazing form of communication. I have just no words really to describe it. It's this very, it's a soul-to-soul connection. It's like hugging another person when they're in the depths of grief, and you're not running away. You just open your arms. You don't have to wrap your arms around them. Once the arms are open, they come to you, and they want to be enfolded. Because suddenly there's space here for me to express this deep, terrible grief. And they couldn't do it with any other person, because they already understood that whoever is not prepared for this is not going to be able to handle it.
Which is, again, why you're there potentially in this interaction. And the other thing that you can do at that particular time, even though it's maybe not grief, is because you're presenting yourself as a presence and they feel your presence, it will change their response. It'll prepare the ground, if you will. So then you can engage in the Socratic method. Say, okay, well, now we're already a being. We're not judgmental. We've already got some tenuous connection. So now, I didn't understand what you meant by X. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Because I want to know. I want to understand you.
Right.
It's a great position to be in, not a I want to defeat you or I want to pigeonhole you.
No, that is the foundation of it. I want to understand you.
I want to understand you, exactly.
And we now understand we are at the end of our hour.
You have to define that for me.
Done.
Okay, well, I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.